tonight. We start this evening with Pledge of Allegiance. Please all rise. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And first up, we'll take comments from the public. We have any sign-ups. Come on up.
So I'm not sure what just stand right here when you make public comment. Just stand.
Right here, just so we can see it.
All
Yeah.
right.
Thank you.
Hi. So good evening. I'm so happy to be here and see everybody. I was going to write last week to during like Board of Education thank you week or whatever, but when I heard this was in person, I thought I would come in and say it, to your faces. And I'm happy to be here. I wanted to thank you for your time, your expertise, sharing all of it with our town. And as a friend of mine, Alex, says, this is the hardest working board that we have, between the commitments for these meetings, your special meetings, your committee meetings, talking with all of us. I really appreciate it, and it's important for our kids, our families, our town, our state, our country, our future. So I really just wanted to say that. So I thank you all for your commitment. Bless you. And then I saw the agenda, and I saw mental health supports. So I'm sorry, I'm also going to have to say I hope we hear a little bit about healthy start times, because experts, medical experts talk about the fact that healthy sleep, adequate sleep is highly correlated to well-being, mental health, certainly physical health. So I hope that we hear something about that. And I didn't bring my glasses up, but and it's demonstrated links to depression, anxiety, bipolar disorders, other conditions too. So I hope that was discussed. Finally, they're my purses. Okay. Oh, but I am going to need them. I'm sorry. Finally, a friend of mine, when she heard her letter wasn't going to be read aloud, since this is an in-person meeting, she asked me to do it. So, from Nicole Ferguson, Ramapo Road. Dear Board of Education, due to an out-of-town commitment, I could not attend the meeting on April 4th. Therefore, I ask that my letter be read aloud at the 7 o'clock meeting. Thank you. I've become extremely concerned by recent posts that seem to be sanctioned by specific Board of Education members. Bullying has no place in or around Ridgefield Public Schools, and I believe it would be advantageous to have a policy that provides guidelines for Board of Education members on social media. Should one be involved in a Facebook group that consistently abuses others, it is probably wise to distance themselves from this specific group. Leadership starts from the top down, and harassing others verbally, in writing, or through any other format is not leadership we should support. We rely on our elected officials to show respect, integrity, and compassion, just as we teach our children. I believe the public would appreciate a statement from the Board of Ed declaring that they do not support bullying of anyone, adult or child. The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. When we stand by while other people suffer, we are guilty of abuse ourselves. As a Ridgefield resident and taxpayer, a proclamation declaring that you are not in favor of supporting bullying on social media or anywhere else allows me to have confidence in the Board of Ed and the Ridgefield Public Schools. Anything less than this sends a terrible message to our children. I voted for leaders and hope that you will act accordingly. Thank you. Sincerely, Nicole. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else signed up? Okay, next up is my report, in which I make absolutely nobody here happy. I'd like to be making my report about goings on in the district, education, legislation that might affect us, any of those things. But instead, I'm going to remind us, all of us board members, that we're volunteers. We work hard. We spend our time, our effort, our energy, our emotions on behalf of the students in the community of Ridgefield. At the same time, I'll say that we are elected public officials and choose to be so. We know that our work is done in public. And we know that and expect and actually welcome feedback from the public. And we don't expect all of it to be what we want to hear. The board needs to stay focused on the work that we're actually elected to do. I have concerns that this board, by and large new to working together, is becoming distracted and missing opportunities to collaborate for the betterment of the district. The disruptions occurring through email and social media do not benefit any of us, especially our students. As board chair, I'm committed to ensuring that our meetings are productive and meet the agenda's purpose. I'll remind us all that the Board of Education meetings themselves are the venue in which we serve the district. This is where our commitment is evidenced. I'm confident that if we all stay focused on our roles and responsibilities as board members, we will be able to fulfill the mission of the Board of Education. And to the community, I would ask that you support these efforts by providing your feedback and input in a manner that is constructive and respectful. I cannot control what happens outside these meetings, but I would like to remind us all, as adults, that we are role models for young people. Also, about public comment. Recently, we've expanded public comment to 2 different sessions. Before, at the beginning of our meetings, we're up to 30 minutes, as well at the end of our meetings, for as long as it takes for everyone to have their voices heard. In the event that you're not able to join us for a meeting, you can send a letter to the Board of Education, and all of the board members will receive and read that letter. During our Zoom period, we did read in letters that were sent to the Board of Education instead of having people come to those Zoom sessions. That was not our standard practice, and that is discontinued now that we're back in person. I know that will make some people upset because we did receive some letters requesting them to be read in this evening. Luckily, one did get read in, but we're back to business as usual. Public comment before and at the end of every meeting, by email at any time to the full board, and that's it. I look forward to a very productive Board of Ed meeting this evening. That's all I have to say.
All right, so we don't have mics. Welcome, everyone. So I'm going to have to use my elementary cafeteria voice, and not that I ever needed to use it, but on occasion, just occasion I did. So a couple of exciting things. Our Model UN group, they actually had a virtual competition this past weekend. It was held at George Washington University. It was the 23rd annual competition. We have 2 students, and I hope that I pronounced their names correctly. Victor Uceda Sosa and David Zalabowski. I guess they don't really have awards per se, but these 2 students were identified for their outstanding contributions to their respective committees. So congratulations to those 2 students and all of the students that competed this past weekend. We continue to be very, very proud of you. Early this morning, I learned that there was a ceremony for our Future Business Leaders of America. Out of the 37 competing students, we actually had 28 students qualify to meet at nationals in Chicago. 28 out of 37, did you hear that? 28 out of 37. In order to qualify, they actually needed to be in the top 4 in the state. So some of the events were publication design, business ethics, there were a bunch of them. So very, very, very excited for that group of kids and how exciting to go to Chicago. Hopefully they'll enjoy themselves. Keith Margolis will be celebrating alongside his PTA and some of his colleagues here. He was honored for the Connecticut Elementary PTA Principal Award. I think that's early May, so congratulations to Keith. Last week we had a congratulations to Tim Salem for his distinguished principal for ASSL, the American Association of School Librarians, recognized Tim Salem. So exciting news for our 2 principals. Next week we will have, or not next week, next Board of Ed meeting, we will actually have some children here presenting to the Board of Education. The only clue that I'll give you is our mascot is a little black dog. You'll have to figure that one out yourself. But looking forward to seeing them in 2 weeks from now. And so not much more to share. We just met last week, but it's nice to see everybody again in person. We will have to project the best that we can given the environment. A big thanks to Dr. DeSantis. Paying attention, Dr. DeSantis?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Make sure the audio feed's on.
Yes, yeah, and to John Mansfield. For those of you that don't know, that Ridgefield Public Schools curtain that's up during our Zoom meetings is actually now here in person, and that's John. And we truly, truly could not have done it without him, I guarantee you that. So big, big thanks to John and to Dr. DeSantis. And so I think that's it for me, and on to committee chairs, I guess.
Thank you very much. And committee chairs, do we have any committee chairs with anything to report this evening? I know it's only been 1 week. How about liaison reports?
Liaison?
Sean?
Okay. So there was a rather significant overview that Cave, the Connecticut Associations of Board of Ed, did about upcoming legislation that has passed through committee and gone to the floor Wednesday last week. There are about 18 bills that affect schools in our state. About 3 or 4 of those actually deal with our ECS funding, which is our special education cost sharing grants. That would be, they're various language, so we'll see which ones go through, but essentially any towns with lower property wealth would have a higher ECS contribution, so less funding for Ridgefield likely on these. So there was not a model of these bills that CAVE could provide, so they're going to go back to the legislations and ask, so we don't really know how much this would impact us. But rest assured, it likely would not benefit us highly financially one way or the other. There are some of the criteria for those grants are also changing as well. So it's a matter of going through and seeing what the final language is, but they're highly likely to pass something that changes our ECS contributions for going forward. The other significant bill is SB1, which has a House version that's 5,000 something. They may merge together. But in effect, what they want to do is have a bill that allows for a certification program for human services to allow people with 1 year experience or less to provide mental health services to kids. This is highly concerning from a lot of the Board of Ed members that were sitting on that call. There's liability here. The commissioner has concerns about this. It's not very well written, was the consensus on this, and while the intent is probably nice, someone without a significant background in mental health trying to deal with children's mental health is probably not a recipe for success. So SB1 is one to watch. They do believe that the language of concern will be changed, but I would say this is something everyone in the community, I would encourage you to read it and write your legislators on how you feel about that. Couple of other key noted ones. There's a construction bill, SB 428, that talks about HVAC grants, which is something we need, and also some language around using minority-owned companies for maintenance and looking at school construction limits of 3 years to complete projects. So maybe this room will get done in that time frame. But
Take
so
the knife out of your bag.
not on anyone here's fault, but supply chain notwithstanding. But I would encourage you, the ECS ones are probably the most concerning. There is some changes to curriculum under the House Bill 5285 requiring climate change as part of the science program and piloting financial literacy courses. There's quite a few task forces that are being built as a result of many of these bills. Funding for all of them wasn't clear, so they haven't gone through the financial funding process yet. So just pay attention. There's a lot going on.
Thank you. Good report. Sean, you had a...
Yeah, the calendar's flipped. It's now April. April is Alcohol Awareness Month for Ridgefield Prevention Council. So look for messaging on their website and social media. They're trying to increase public understanding and spotlight the need for a focus on alcoholism and alcohol-related issues, especially teens. We lose over 4,700 teens per year to alcohol. So be aware.
Thank you, Sean. Other liaison reports?
I joined the PTA meeting and I let them know about the important dates coming up, such as the Board of Finance voting on our budget tomorrow night. Dr. DeSilva was there to answer questions, and some of the questions that came up regarded the music department, the bridge program, and the importance of the budget.
Thank you. Any other liaison reports? Okay, moving on to, is our student representative here?
Yes.
There he is. Come on up.
Got another cafeteria space. Feel it.
Is this right?
Yes. Okay.
All right, well, good evening, everybody. I'm delighted to be here in person with you all for the first time, even though it's already April. Let me tell you, time is whizzing by right now as we're about to complete quarter 3 and head on over into quarter 4. For us seniors, this is the home stretch right before the finish line. And you know, it's hitting in pretty hard that this is it, you know. College commitment posts are piling up on Instagram and Facebook. Senior internships will be starting in 1 month. And before you know it, boom, we'll be walking across that stage, collecting our diplomas from Dr. Greenwood, and starting the next chapters of our lives. However, as bittersweet as this moment is, there's still much going on right now, which I'm sure you're all curious to hear about. So, getting forward, on Thursday, March 23rd, the freshmen came into school and they took their PSATs, while the juniors took their SATs. And this gave the sophomores and seniors the opportunities to sleep in, which obviously we all love, as their classes started at around 1 o'clock. On the topic of standardized testing, AB tests are right around the corner, which will start in May, so AB classes are beginning to initiate their study modes, and we'll be extra focused this month to ensure that we score well in these exams. Finally, there will also be a college fair on this Thursday for our RHS students to attend, and this will give them the opportunity to actively think about their future and potential college candidates if that is the route they want to take. Moving away from the boring academic talk, spring sports have begun and are in full swing. This past Saturday, the baseball team came out with a dominating 9-0 win in a game against Fairfield Prep, a team ranked top 5 in the state. We're sure that this will be the first of many wins for the baseball team. More good news for Richfield, and probably less exciting for Fairfield Prep, is that in a rematch of the state championship game from last year, the boys lacrosse team pulled out a nice victory to add to the town spirit. On top of these teams, we have high hopes for some trophies coming from girls lacrosse, girls softball, the track and field team, and last but definitely not least, with some bias, the boys volleyball team. That's all I have for you tonight, so thank you all so much for your time.
Thank you so much. Next up is Andy AR.
That's a tough act to follow, everybody. Hello. How are you all doing? Welcome. Thank you so much for having me. I'm Liz Garland with the NEAR. This is the first time I've been here. I'm so excited to be in this room. And be back in person. So it's true what they say. March came in like a lion and out like a lamb. Teachers were thrilled to get a few weeks of consistency without any weather hiccups. And fingers crossed we are out of the worst of it. But because we are shifting into spring, we are focusing on state testing, and all of our teachers are working hard to prepare our students. And we know that a lot of these mandates are state mandates. We as teachers, our focus remains on the social emotional well-being and post-pandemic growth of our students. We had a food drive this month with the Boys and Girls Club. It was a huge success, thanks in big part to our wonderful community and the generosity of our teachers and our district. We were absolutely blown away by the generosity. March was a hard time to run a food drive, but our staff, families, and administration came together and we were able to restock their pantry and help provide food to be made into weekend bags for breakfast, lunch, and dinner for families in our community who just need that extra support. But thank you, a big thank you to Dr. De Silva and the Ridgefield Public Schools for supporting us and through that drive. Teachers have been following the budget process, and as we've said previously, we appreciate Dr. De Silva for putting together a responsible budget for the Ridgefield Public Schools. We've got all our fingers and toes crossed for tomorrow night as we wait on the Board of Finance. As teacher shortages all over the country continue to make headlines, we hope to partner with the district, mentoring and supporting incoming teachers in the fall. We recognize that we as human capital is what makes RPS a district of choice. And with the current challenges of teacher shortages, we know how vital it is to devote energy and resources into maintaining our amazing staff. We are also happy to hear that the summer bridge program is happening again. Teachers are very excited to participate and the offerings are certainly interesting. I was cruising through them the other day and there's some really, really fabulous options. I can't wait to hear more about it later. And that's it. We're really looking forward into going into spring and going back to normal. We wish everybody a happy spring break and good luck with the rest of the month. Thank you.
Thank you. And PTA.
Hello, everybody. or Mrs. Opal assisted with the PTA with their Come Play School event, teaching parents the strategies to use to teach multiplications in grades 3 through 5. On April 21st, Branchville is hosting their first in-person math night since the pandemic, where families will gather in the cafeteria to play a variety of math games. Scotland PTA is sponsoring a 2-week math-a-thon for students, and to help, students are using extra math online to help reinforce basic facts. Money raised from this math-a-thon will go towards to support the PTA and to build a well in Sudan, which is a project that their 5th grade students have decided that that's what they want to fund. In reading, VP completed their March Readathon Bingo fundraiser on the 31st, and they raised over $5,000. Ridgebury also finished their Rex Readathon, reading over 350,000 minutes, and they had a guest reader, which was Senator Will Haskell, who spent some time with the students. Ridgebury also had author Sarah Weeks visit with students and autographed over 120 books. And Barlow Mountain had an author visit scheduled with author Lori Keller for April. Fun enrichment programs are happening all over our schools. VP sponsored a live science assembly by Dirtmeister for the school. Scotland's spring after-school enrichment will begin after spring break. Farmingville students had a chance to participate in cutting and painting tiles during their art class, which will be displayed in the Be Kind mural that will be installed at the end of the month. Kaleidoscope Garden will be back at Farmingville, and they'll start their spring workshops. And at Farmingville, Mr. Ether will begin using his mini grant money that the PTA supplies to bring their 1st grade on a trip to duck ping bowling. Barlow PTA is continuing with their wellness and STEAM challenges. Community service is still a constant in our schools, and Barlow is still holding their monthly Dorothy Day service project, and their Angels group has been helping a family in need. The Eastridge play raised $700 for the Fragile X, and it was a huge success. Farmingville Kids Care held a Lego drive for families and children's aid in March, and in April they'll be making sandwiches for the Dorothy Day Hospitality House. Some fun, exciting things the PTA is sponsoring. Activities include Scotland PTA is holding a contest to name their school mascot. The Bobcat Boogie, which is a fun event and fundraiser for the Blooming Bobcats Garden. The event will take place during recess at the end of the month, featuring an obstacle course, an arborist, and more. And their 5th grade is hosting a spring plant sale and a chocolate sale to end their year celebrations. VP held their first PTA variety show in 3 years, and it was a huge success with over 70 kids participating and more than 25 acts. It was a packed house in their auditorium. Eastridge had their winter social and over 200 students attended. They're currently planning their 8th grade picnic and moving up celebration. Farmingville had their school play. The FBS Play Space Pirates performed by their 4th and 5th graders, and their spring running club started last Friday with some rain, but will go through the middle of May before school once a week. Barlow's monthly Wear It Wednesday Spirit Days continue to brighten the school hallways. Of course, our PTAs never forget to include parents in the fun. Farmingville had their biennial gala last month at Candlewood Inn. They had a great time, raised funds for their students, and celebrated the Farmingville community. On April 20th, Scotland will be having their social event to help raise funds for the PTA and to celebrate their PTA community. And Barlow's Parents' Night Out is scheduled for May 21st at Nod Hill. And finally, none of these programs or events would be possible without help from the amazing teachers in our schools. Barlow's Paraprofessional Appreciation Day will be celebrated this Wednesday with treats and a small gift for Paris, a banner made by Student Council, and certificates in appreciation. And they've begun planning for Teacher Appreciation Week in May. Eastern teachers will be receiving treats this week with a special message of, "Aren't you glad it's almost spring break?" And to keep spirits high, they're giving teachers something exciting to look forward to this week. The ERMS PTA has Brick House Pizza Trip coming for their teacher appreciation in May. Thank you for allowing me to update you on all our busy PTAs, and we can't wait to see what our PTAs do next month.
Thank you. Okay, next up is the approval of the February 28th minutes. Do I have a motion?
I move that the Board of Education approve the minutes of the regular Board of Education meeting on February 28th, 2022.
Thank you, Rachel. Do I have a second? Ken? Any adjustments, errors, any changes to be made? There being none, all those in favor of approving the minutes from February 28th, please raise your hands. That's 7-4. Any against? Any abstain? 7-4, 1 abstain. Motion carries. Thank you all. And moving on to first discussion item of the night is the overview of mental health structures.
All right, so I have the pleasure of introducing Dr. Hanaway. Dr. Hanaway will speak to during her presentation that this is really a two-part series. You'll hear more about the second part through Dr. Hanaway's presentation, which will then lead into a presentation that you'll hear more about from Ms. Gillette and the team. I think that everyone who's here, and certainly anyone who's been paying attention to the budget process, you've heard us talk, not necessarily a direct through line, but what you have heard us talk through is the challenges that our students are facing in our schools, and the supports that they've needed, whether that's been through our psychological supports that we have available to our social workers, counseling staff, and quite frankly, we lean in on every staff member. You heard Ms. Carone speak about our paraprofessionals, and it is their week this week. But our teachers, our administrators, we all have a hand in supporting the wellness of our kids day to day. And so certainly a theme in our budget, really relevant right now for all of us, and I'll kick it over to Dr. Hanaway.
Great, thank you. How does that work? I guess I'll be the second. Oh, great.
There you go.
Just works by moving the mouse.
Who knew? All right. So good evening, everybody. Hopefully you can hear me. So I'm going to be speaking tonight about, and we practice this as an overview of our mental health services with regards to what we do right now. The second part of this conversation that's going to be coming later this school year is going to be heavy on programming. So tonight's really going to be about the who, and the upcoming conversation is going to be about the what. Of course, I'm happy to answer questions about the what this evening as well, but this is mostly going to focus on who is part of our mental health team. And I've gotten a lot of questions from parents this school year in particular. Well, who works in our schools that may be able to support kids with mental health? Okay, so I'm going to introduce or reintroduce you to who our team is of support service professionals, review what our investment in these professionals has been over the last number of years for social, emotional, behavioral supports, give a brief overview of each role of these individuals, and I expect a lot of questions on how is that different from what I just heard of this other person, because there is a lot of overlap, but there are distinctions, so I'm happy to get into that. I'm going to just briefly touch upon programs we provide, although that'll come more in the coming presentation, and then also looking ahead to future years. Okay, so who makes up our team? And some of these folks, I think right now we're calling them mental health professionals. We actually function far more in an educational realm in the school setting. So none of these people are clinicians. They're all education-based providers. But this includes school psychologists, which are very different from a clinical psychologist, social workers, school counselors, board-certified behavior analysts, and I'm also including here our teen talk counselors, which have garnered some conversation in recent budget years. So these next couple slides, I'm not going to read them to you, but they are from position statements from the Connecticut State Boards of Education regarding these professionals and why they want to make sure districts know why they believe they're so important to invest in. And so just a couple pieces to highlight here is that they believe that student support services professionals assist the student population, parents, and the entire school community in establishing a full range of prevention and intervention systems. And this is a huge piece of these people's roles, is around prevention and intervention.
They also are huge supports to their colleagues, and other educators, administrators, and staff members, as well as parents, to respond to factors that are affecting students' learning, and COVID has shown this to us more than ever. They are attuned to identifying risk factors that maybe other folks won't pick up on as we're looking at student performance, and again, coming back to that role, main role of providing prevention and intervention. So that's why they're important for our schools. Why are these folks important for our families and our community? And the State Board of Education wants us to remember that these professionals, another big part of their role is to build connections between home and school. I can't tell you how many conversations I've been in with parents that person is the one person that the family shared something with because they felt comfortable enough to do that made a big difference in our ability to support and help the child. Their job is very much to ensure that open lines of communication are there for families in expressing their concerns, and also to understand our community and the resources available in our community for when there's something that really maybe would be best if we supported a family to access a resource within the community. And so we have a lot of those conversations. They have a lot of these conversations with families around what's kind of within the school realm and what's something that resources within the town can support. So that's what the State Board of Ed believes. So what do we believe and why this is an important team for us? So I think it's important to highlight they are very critical members of what our administrators would call their instructional and safety leadership teams in their schools. Your school psychologists, school counselors, social workers, they are often your administrator's first call in a very difficult situation, and very much so in a crisis situation. Their ability to be responsive and flexible is critical to meet their needs when unexpected challenges arise, and we have found them to be reliable in those situations again and again. They also act as supports to colleagues in a variety of ways. They don't play therapist at school for their colleagues. That's not what this is about. But because of their background and training, they really can identify when somebody maybe needs a little bit extra more support, consultation, or coaching to work with a child. And then they bring expertise from a variety of backgrounds, and yes, professional development that we've provided, but I feel really lucky that we have a group of professionals who have come from a variety of settings. You know, people who have worked not only in other school districts, but in other states, in other types of settings, and they bring a wealth of knowledge with them. And families, again, have reported again and again that they've made a big difference for them in helping understand their child's profile and their child's performance. And I'll just say, before I get into this big, large table, all of these, they fall under either my pupil personnel or special education budget, but they support the entire school. This is not about students who have a quote plan or maybe have special needs. They are support to the entire school. So this is what I would call our historical investment in staffing for special services, pupil personnel, mental health providers, going back to the 2015-2016 school year. So this is our Board of Education operating budget positions. I will touch in a moment any positions that are funded through our IDEA grant. But you'll see that we have made a consistent increase in our school psychologists, in particular at the elementary level. In the 1920 school year, we increased by 3, which are shared across schools. Our school counselors have remained consistent for the middle and high schools because those are heavily determined based on whole school population. We do have a slight decrease for the proposed 22-23 budget, and that's because of the reorganization of that counseling supervisor position. Our social workers, we have increased, and that part of that 0.7 at this point is also in the grant. So we have 2 social workers at the high school, and then we do use contracted services for social work at our alternative high school, but that's not a Board of Education position. Our board certified behavior analysts, we have steadily increased over time, and the big distinction here between the 1920 and the 2021 school years, we drew down heavily on an outside contracted service through CCSN, in which we had gotten to the point of being able to, quote, graduate from that, and so we reallocated those funds, and it's worked out beautifully that we've, basically functioned with our own Board of Ed employees and saved a lot of money in the meantime. And then our teen talk counselors, which are at our middle and high schools, started only at the high school. I learned all the way back to 2003. And then there's an investment in East Ridge and then into Scotts Ridge, and so we have 3 of those. And then these positions that are funded right now through the IDEA grant. So we've consistently had 1.5 psychologists, 0.3 of a social worker, which brings us to a 2.0 whole, and then 0.5 of counselor. This hasn't changed because the amount of money we've gotten in the grant since 15-16 really hasn't changed that much. So our ability to be flexible with this has not been there, so it's remained the same. This just shows our allocations of these type of professionals across our schools. If you look all the way to the right, high school has the full range of services just due to the nature and size of the school. And the same thing with Scotts Ridge and East Ridge, who have all 4 except for the social worker. And then the elementary and preschools have school psychologists and BCBAs. And we've had a lot of conversation, especially when we decide to increase the school psychologists at the elementary level. Should that be a school counselor? Should that be a social worker? And we agree that at the elementary level, the school psychologist avails for a higher level of flexibility than the other positions could provide. Okay, so again, the State Department of Education is very clear in terms of what they believe school psychologists bring to the table. And I think the best way that I've heard a school psychologist describe is like the Swiss Army knife of mental health positions in schools, because they really do have the full gamut of responsibility and skills. So they are heavily trained to conduct diagnostic evaluations of kids to understand their learning profile, but also to develop plans to support them. They are very much involved in MTSS in terms of providing early intervention supports for students, but they also have a big role in collaborating with their administrators to affect whole school initiatives as it relates to social, emotional, and behavioral functioning. More recently, our school psychologists have also played a great role with supporting kids with what we call study skills. We've seen a high increase in kids who need a lot of support with what we call our executive functions, which have to do with the organization skills to being a student. And that's relatively newer in the last 12 to 15 years as being a big part of their role, but it definitely is at this point. Our social workers are a critical part of our high school because a big piece of what they bring is the connection with community resources. And I highlighted that at the bottom. But really, why a social worker and not just more school psychologists at the high school is because what we find is that many of our students have a lot of outside providers who they work with. Families are looking for resources that are what we call wraparound, which support the home and the school, and this is a social worker wheelhouse. It's why you find social workers across anywhere you go. A hospital setting, a senior care, any type of situation where somebody has to deal with a family unit, you'll find a social worker, and it's far more appropriate with their training that it be a social worker. And they also have a scope that has to do with non-academic barriers to student success. So their job is really to understand the whole dynamic of the situation and what could be the barriers there that are not academically oriented. And that's why we felt, given the nature of high school, the social dynamics, the familial, expansion at that point in kids' independence, that social workers are really most appropriate at the high school. Our school counselors. So school counselors can play a social, emotional, behavioral support role. In our schools, they absolutely play that role, but really kind of more secondary to the psychologists and social workers. Their primary role is supporting students with their long-term academic plans. So very traditionally, they're no longer guidance counselors, they're school counselors, but very traditionally, they help students with their academic planning and goal setting. And even going so far as into to the middle school, do they play that role? They have a high amount of collaboration with families, teachers, administrators, and the community in a similar way that social workers do, but less about trying to understand the emotional dynamics at play that are impacting a child, but really looking to make long-term plans for them. And a big part of the school counselor role is to support the student to become more independent, to advocate for themselves, to make their own choices, to set their own path, which is a big reason why the high school has taken a big initiative on developmental guidance lessons, developmental counseling lessons at the high school to support students to be self-advocates. So the last role that I'll highlight is our board certified behavior analysts. I think in the larger scope and larger world, these are not actually considered mental health providers. They are they're behavioral specialists, and which is why we have so few of them in the district. We only have 4, because really what they are needed for is in very specific situations when students have some kind of behavior that is interfering with their ability to participate or learn at school. Kids have behaviors all over the place. Let's be clear. Everybody deals with student behaviors, but this is when it's really a great impediment. And so common aspects of their role is to do assessment. They play a very important role in our RISE programs in terms of supporting program design and implementation alongside the special education teacher. They meet with families to support them to carry over a lot of our behavioral structures in the home, which is a huge request we get from families. And they spend a lot of time training staff on strategies to support positive student behavior. The only school where we have a BCBA who's only dedicated to that environment is the high school, and technically it's the high school, alternative high school, and the 18 to 22 transition program. And then those are our Board of Ed employees. We contract for Teen Talk counselors through an organization called Kids in Crisis, which is out of Greenwich. The Teen Talk program is designed to provide mental health support and resources to kids to navigate acute, really difficult situations. And that's what their training is for, to avoid reaching crisis points, because they can pull in the weight of the resources available through their organization in a way that we can't. They help families manage crises during but also beyond school hours. So families can contact Kids in Crisis and access one of the Teen Talk counselors 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. So having that immediate connection, we found, has been, for some families, game-changing, really, to avoid other types of interventions that they feel could be detrimental for their family. They do not play an educational role in the traditional sense, and we have them work directly with families and students in our schools, but it's not under the auspices of any kind of formal educational plan. They're not implementing IEPs, they're not implementing 504s, they are mandated reporters, there's an open lines of communication, they follow the same codes of practice with regards to confidentiality that our own in-district providers do. So there are things that they're very, very aware of, that there's no secrets at school just because you're, participating, in an office space with us. Because that question comes up a lot, is that like, well, can I tell the Teen Talk counselor something that you won't make sure won't get to my principal? No, unfortunately not. If your principal needs to know, it doesn't matter who it's reported to, your principal needs to know. So this has been a wonderful partnership with the district. It goes back a long way and has grown over time. And this is just an example. These are many, many things that they do. But as you'll see, and there's called Kids in Crisis, crisis response is a huge, huge part of the work that they do, and very much connecting families to outside resources and being available to them outside of the school day, which many families take advantage of. Kids in Crisis also has respite services, which means if students, have a situation where they need somewhere to stay, they have the only local, I think technically, the only local child-based acceptable shelter for kids to be in this Fairfield County area that's for minors. Once in a while, we need a specialized consultation. So we have tremendous staff. I have a lot of confidence in the expertise that we have in district, but sometimes there's a situation that is so unique or specialized that we need to access somebody on the outside, and we do. More often than not, it's psychiatric. And that is really where our school psychologists feel as though it's something that's beyond their scope, and we have local psychiatrists who we consult with who will provide school-based assessments for us. Other examples might be something like selective mutism, something that is just so unique but definitely majorly impacting. We often will access outside consultations for low prevalence disabilities. So the social emotional impacts of someone who might be blind, which is very specialized. And then more frequently lately, we've been accessing specialized consultations for things like trauma and PTSD for students. So we did not ask for more positions within this domain in our upcoming budget. So one reason is because we're still collecting data around what's going to be the utility of it in the long run. So while we absolutely have seen students impacted by this pandemic in social, emotional, behavioral ways. One more person in the building right now can't meet all of those needs at once. So what we've tried to do instead is support the entire faculty to be responsive to student needs. Not that they always have to be the interventionist, but to be watching and reporting. So the information that we're collecting right now to see in future years to come, is this an area where we need to consider making a change? Has there been a change in our referrals to special education for social, emotional, behavioral reasons? Has there been an increase to our MTSS services for behavior? Has there been a change in our 211 or 911 calls, in our DCF referrals, in our school avoidance and truancy data, and school discipline referrals? I know kids are impacted, but for me to quantify it or qualify it in a way that helps me build a clear understanding of how to use a new resource, I just don't feel like there's been enough time or new information to define that yet. And we're not, we're providing students the support that they need, and when we're not available, when we don't have it in district, we're seeking resources to fund it. So I will take questions. Yeah.
So I'm glad the data piece of it is obviously intriguing. It's a little bit, we all know kids are really in a crisis from this pandemic and beyond, and I don't think any of us really understand how deeply that goes. What I'm curious about is a lot of these are very distinct and sort of escalated data points. I'm wondering about the kids in the middle, right? The kids who just have checked out, where they're really struggling to get back in the game. Especially on the high school and middle school levels, you can look at any data and the levels of suicidal tendencies and just drug abuse, depression, all of these factors are pretty profound, but that's the macro level.
Yeah.
And I just wonder, those kids in the middle are the ones where I wonder, how can we create data sets that allow a little prediction on when a kid is starting to fail, right?
So, thank you for the question. I'll just give it at the high school level. So I think a big thing that we look for, and this is where our school counselors are beyond critical, is change in what we know to be normal from this student, right? Because that's the first comment you hear. He's different now. He didn't used to do that. That's not how he normally is. But if you don't know the student really well, what their normal attendance is like, what their grades are like, what kind of referrals you're getting, how often you're seeing them, you have to know that person in order to be able to identify that change. And if you're a new teacher to them, a lot of times you may have no idea. So your school counselors are so critical, and that is a lot of the work that they do, is trying their best to make sure they're seeing their kids on a regular basis and to be watching for all of those smaller changes in their performance. It's not always easy to tell, for sure, and it's been very difficult to tell when defining the norm for kids who weren't in school for 2 years before, who you may only been meeting with them in person for the first time this year, and they were on your caseload for 2 years, or 18 months before that. It's not ideal, to say the best of it. But I think that your thought on, is there a way to I think what you're saying, to systematize looking at that is important. I know the middle schools have been doing it just because the size of their caseloads are smaller and their ability to do it is a lot higher. So and they have the team structure. So the school counselors go to their team meetings and they're hearing the conversations of the only 4 teachers who have those kids. So it's a lot easier to pick up on those nuances, and they do have the same kids for 3 years. At the high school level, it's a lot harder. They have a student review process internally within the school counseling department, but I don't think we have as clear cut as the data that I presented, as systematized of a way, which is something we're gonna have to develop.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you for the question.
Can I just add something to what you just brought up, Liz? is that this year, a through line into the budget is that we did ask for an additional staff member to be shared between ERMS and CERMS for MTSS behavior. And you alluded to tracking the MTSS behavior. When we talk about behavior through the MTSS process, it really is a referral that's from a teacher that says, I need help with the student. And I need help because there's something that is happening with this student that may, by the way, have already happened in the past, but that's happening with the student, and I truly don't have the strategies on my own to work with this child. So they go and they look for additional support. Sometimes it's from the providers that Dr. Hanaway just mentioned. It could be the psychologists, the counselors. It depends on the area of need. But this MTSS individual, in particular at the middle school, is intended to do some of that proactive work and support classroom teachers through that process. And that data is incredibly important because looking at kids' patterns over time. So when you see a child that, generally speaking, is quote unquote typical, right? Like moving along your little learning continuum, and then all of a sudden you see a shift, whether that's attendance or going to the school nurse a lot, or all of a sudden having issues socially that they might not have had in the past, it elevates it. The other piece that, in terms of systematizing, that Dr. Hanaway mentioned, I believe at our most recent Board of Finance meeting, and certainly at the Board of Ed, is having a data management system to be able to follow our students along that path. And from my experience, what can happen is that you can, not intentionally, but you can miss signs that happened early on, but we just didn't have them. We were just doing this and they're in a folder, right? And so it's not that you're tracking students, but you might have a student who's in fifth grade, and now in 8th grade. And interestingly enough, in 5th grade, this student had a goal that we were working on that was kind of similar here, and what was happening there and what's happening now. And so it's not, so we can ensure that we're just following kids' trajectory along, because they do have ebbs and flows. And for those of us who have kids, know that they're perfectly fine 1 minute and not so much the next minute. And whether or not that's a moment in time, like all of us go through, or whether or not this is going to be long term, is the piece that we need to work through. And through general education, when we have the supports available to our teachers to support them, we can do a lot of mitigation before we go down another realm, perhaps of something long term, where now we're looking at a 504, an IEP, because instead we supported that child through the general ed process, which is at least restrictive, of course, and hopefully meeting their needs.
So would that system then be able to catch the slow shifts, the gradual change that the student may go through over a few years, as opposed to an abrupt?
So what I think it does do is it allows us to identify those patterns, because there is a structure in place that, teacher A identified this area of need, student made growth, right? Whether it's executive functioning and behavior, well, it's some of the social needs, whatever that is. And then all of a sudden, 4 months later, when that child is no longer with that teacher, summer happens with a new teacher, you're not starting from scratch. That teacher can go in and just say, let me just take a look at Susie. Oh, I see, that's interesting, because last spring she had that same challenge, seemed to be doing just fine, and now here it is bubbling up again. So does Susie need more supports than what perhaps was initially provided to that student in a short-term way? Maybe this is something that we need to be a little bit more specific about, and perhaps identify some, again, through general ed, some structures that child has some consistent supports.
Does PowerSchool not have they don't have access, the teachers don't have access to year-over-year data in PowerSchool?
So we do have, so that's an interesting question.
Sorry.
We do actually have, and Dr. DeSantis is in the corner to let us
PowerSchool.
know, but we do.
About PowerSchool
But
access.
what did you ask about what data they have in it? I didn't hear the whole question.
Yeah, I asked about PowerSchool. Do teachers year-over-year have access to prior year?
Okay, prior year, that's the word I didn't hear.
I know you're chomping a bit too, but so the answer to that, the short answer is yes.
Okay.
However, there are add-ons to features that allow us, right, and that's what I think you heard both Corey and Wes speak about. There's add-on features that allow us to do that in a far cleaner way, so it's not as challenging. Just another piece, because I think it is important for you to hear this now, the board, and I see a Board of Selectmen member there in the audience as well, is we are fortunate to have a partnership with the town, and I believe a private donor to support kids in crisis. So we currently, I think we pay about a third. That's not a forever thing. And so that's just something to put over here that if and when that changes in terms of the allocations, and specifically that private donor, what that's gonna look like for the Board of Education. Again, it's a great service because they do provide, you know, that 24/7 care. And, you know, we've had students just this week where they, you know, had to go to the hospital at 4 or 4:30 p.m. Isn't it nice not just to be there alone with your mom, but that mom or dad or grandma or grandpa, whoever it is, to have that support from a clinician that can give them, that can guide them, or a provider that can guide them to the next steps in that process, and feel that there's some connection between the school. And the reality is our staff, although they'd be very willing to stay a little bit longer here and there, they don't have the same supports available to them as the Kids in Crisis group does. So we are fortunate to have that extra layer in our schools.
You have a question?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for the presentation. I love the idea of deputizing all teachers, all staff members to be that first level of a look. But to dig one layer deeper on what Liz was saying, you know, this mental health supports and the learning loss, it's all wrapped up together.
Sure.
And we know after we did the deeper dive on learning loss that it's the 3s and 4s that got hit hard. And that trending is going to be critical to see, not just by the macro of the 3 and the 4, by individual student, by individual subject, whatever, where that drop off happens. And that's where you can intervene as soon as practical. And I'm hoping we can get that data, Power School or otherwise, because I think it's critical to intervening as soon as we can.
I think it's something that's subjectively been in conversation with the school psychologists, counselors, and social workers is how much students lost, very much, or many students lost what their sense of identity was related to school. And a big risk factor for mental health concerns is confusion of self. When you're not really sure where you fit, what you knew about yourself to be, who I am, gets confused and lost, then what we find is, I don't know where I am, I don't know what I'm about, so I'm going to withdraw, or I'm going to do this, or I'm going to redefine myself in a way that's not safe. And so, to your point, in terms of how students knew themselves to be, having had this entire, I'm going to say traumatic experience, and then coming out on the other end and not understanding, maybe I'm not the great student I thought I was, or maybe, this wasn't my path when I had my head set that I was going to do these things. And so that's the kind of conversation we're trying to have with kids, is that, validating their experience, but supporting them that this doesn't define who they are, because that piece of identity has come up again and again and again, and I think it connects what you're saying.
But I think that identity is 3-dimensional. You've talked about 2 of the dimensions. The third one is where they fit into their social circles, which always ebbs and flows during every step of the school process. But during this, it's manifested in just some very weird ways.
Yeah, I agree.
And I don't know how we quantify that. I don't know how we do anything about it, except recognize that that's a problem.
Well, I think that's been the big piece, is that kids, of course, most of the time are not coming into the school psychologist's office like, I lost my identity.
Right.
They're not coming in and saying these things, but because we're having these collective conversations, that they are approaching them saying, like, well, what is making you feel like you don't fit in here? And going back to the things that they identified themselves as being positive attributes, and helping them reconnect them that they're still there. The social piece is very, very difficult because many things got scattered.
Yeah.
And so I'm walking back into what feels in many ways like a new or unknown environment, and I'm halfway through high school, or I'm just starting middle school, or I was hoping in my elementary career.
Right.
And
So what I heard through your presentation was, if we had unlimited funding, you still wouldn't need additional resources because you don't have the data to apply them properly. Is that correct?
I don't know yet what I would ask for.
Okay, and
I don't know yet what I would ask for.
That's a fair answer.
I think you bring up another point. I think it was the way you started by saying, I'm glad that I think you used the word deputizing.
Yes.
Sure. But, good word, that, all staff. And I think ultimately when I think about school communities like ours, Ridgefield, or those, let's just say, within our JERC, right? Your Ridgefields, Darien's, Westports, Westons, etc. We do so many things well, right? But then you still have parents or families that might say, you know what, I want to go to an independent school or a prep school. And why is that? And ultimately it boils down to what, in my opinion, is about size, right, and relationships. And the fact that we can be connected to kids in the way in which we are, and I think we'll continue to even be better, and as we go and continue to work hard at this, that matters. You know, the fact that kids have relationships with their adults, whether that's extracurricular or academic, however way, and have multiple relationships is incredibly important for all kids, but especially for those kids that are more fragile and that need that connection. They need someone to reach out and be like, you know what, she is not acting the way in which I normally, or I could tell that there's something going on. Let me just go check in with them. And so that deputizing is more important than ever, in having our eyes on kids in the best way we can, because it can't just be this group of staff, right? They're there oftentimes to intervene, right? And there's some proactive work, of course, there absolutely is, but before that, right? What are we noticing? What are we wondering about? How is this kid typically, and why he or she is acting differently is incredibly important. And so that comes from every single staff member. And honestly, it comes with every part of our work, right? You notice it when you go to work. I notice it when I go to work. If someone's acting a little bit different than they acted yesterday, my colleagues know that I may have not gotten a good enough sleep, or something's happening at home, or I'm not myself. What's happening? How can I help? Having people that can reach out to kids in the same way that we would reach out to one another as adults is very, very important.
But I think that starts with the recognition that these kids spend more waking hours
With us.
with you
with us.
collectively than they do with their parents.
Yeah, yeah, and I can say though, what comes with, so my observation is that staff at large, you know, outside of this group have embraced that deputizing, but it also has come with, I can see that they feel a weight to like make sure they don't miss something. You know, there is a, and that's a good pressure to put on yourself, but you know, there's a lot of conversation where, you know, should we be concerned about this type of behavior, whereas that's not the kind of thing 5 or 8 years ago somebody would have kind of brought up. And so I see that it's good, but I'm also just sensitive to they are bearing a lot to make sure that they're fulfilling that responsibility.
Well, that brings up one last question is, what are we doing to support the teachers to each other?
Well, that was my point earlier, is that first of all, I mean, we put some things into place to support our faculty, but supporting them in terms of their professional learning, their opportunities to collaborate with their partners, whether that's your psychologists, your counselors at the elementary level, when they come in, they meet around kids, specifically behaviorally, they have their psychologists there too, because they're helping them identify strategies. So it's not just the noticing. So now I notice that little Johnny, you know, puts his head down during A, B, or C, but now how do I engage? How do I re-engage? How do I support him if he's having a hard time because of A, B, or C? Because that divorce that's happening in his family isn't going to get better just because he went to the psychologist for a little bit. He's still going to be sad when he comes back.
I think you misunderstand. What are the teachers doing to support each other? I want healthy teachers, mentally healthy teachers. That is a lot of weight to put on a teacher. It's not what they signed up for.
You're right.
So I just want to make sure that we're checking.
So we have two different, this just recently, in fact, we provided our faculty, and I don't know if Liz is there in the background, an opportunity to get some health professional learning for our faculty themselves, mental health.
Mental health first aid.
Right.
Mental health first aid. And they had a great experience. I think Ms. Carlin spoke to that at our last Board of Ed meeting. But in addition to that, we're offering our faculty something called an Employees Assistance Program that's new. I have to thank Ms. Dewing over there in the corner for really being proactive about initiating that in partnership with the needs of our teachers. So that's been, you know, a little bit of work in the making, but it finally just got kicked off, I think, this past Friday. Karen, do you want to speak to some of the resources that are available to our faculty?
Oh, sure. So the Employee Assistance Program is available to all Richmond Public employees, regardless of their part-time or full-time status, as well as their families. And the definition of family is quite expansive. And so when people think about an Employee Assistance Program, they typically think about, oh, I can call, you know, and get some counseling services. But this program is far more than that. So not only does it look at any mental health and wellness, it also looks at how to support families and child care issues and needs, elder care information, financial information, credit card debt, mortgages, loans, wills, legal, and so it's quite expansive, as well as there are also some programs such as, you know, if I want to get some tips on workplace conflict or stress management and different things like that. So It's quite a robust program, and it just was launched on April 1st, as Susie said.
And that was driven actually from conversations with our teachers union about some of the challenges that they were seeing within their unit. So even though it's really starting from our teachers, it really, like Karen said, expands that wide range of our faculty members that are part of Richfield Public Schools, whether they're part-time or full-time. Corey's done a nice job of ensuring that when we schedule professional learning, that there's opportunity for teacher choice and teacher wellness. And sometimes there's very structured opportunities that they can take hold of, or sometimes it's something unstructured, like take a walk with a colleague for an hour around the track and then meet us back. And so we've done that very intentionally, Sean, not only because of what we see or what we notice, but because we know that that's best for all of us, and finding ways in which to structure that outside of, you know, your traditional, I'm coming in to learn about a math program. Well, I'm going to come in to learn about a math program, but what does that day actually look like, and how are we tending to teachers' well-being as well? So hopefully that answered your question this time.
Can I have a build on comment on that? Just something to take away for this board. I think one of the things, it's good, thank you for putting all those supports in, because it is a community effort. The one thing I would say that the board could consider, and I know this is a little off topic, but the size of a classroom depends on if it's too big, there's no way. This all falls apart.
Yeah.
And so we do have size limits on our classrooms, and we've tried very hard to maintain the smallest size classroom we can within our budgets. And I think that's something that this board needs to be very, very aware of in conversations, that this kind of community aspect goes away very quickly the larger you get. It becomes an institution, not a community. And I would just like to say that we should put that on our list of things to consider during other conversations.
Thank you. Other questions? Amy?
Just sort of a logistical question. From looking at your presentation, it seemed as though Teen Talk was for the high school
And middle school.
Okay, yeah. I was wondering, you know, obviously kids are having crises younger and younger nowadays.
Yep.
So I'm just wondering what population that is for. So middle school and
Well, they're assigned at the middle and high school. The Kids in Crisis is available for anybody in the district.
Okay.
So let's just say I'm a staff member at Veterans Park, and I have a student who I think could access, or a family who should consider accessing Teen Talk. I can call up to Eastridge, and they will consult with that family. And outside of school hours, any Ridgefield families connected to the schools could contact Kids in Crisis if they wanted to access their emergency services. You don't just have to be at the middle and high schools. So the 24-hour services are available to anybody because they're connected to the district. But the actual Teen Talk counselors themselves are just assigned to the middle and the high schools.
So Amy, this year, when we were really struggling with the number of students that we felt were in crisis at the elementary level, we actually called together a meeting with Kids in Crisis, Dr. Hanaway and myself, to look at options, perhaps for this coming budget, the fiscal year 23 budget, to see what options were available for us at the elementary level. And so really a shared option didn't seem to make sense at this time. And so one of the things that, and financially, I think that the burden was too big. And again, without having the data that we felt like we really needed to in order to make the right decisions just financially. And again, looking at what's the right staff. If we did need it, who would be the right person with which specialization. We determined that wasn't the option that we would move forward with, at least for fiscal year 23. That said, what we did do then was invited the Kids in Crisis counselors to our elementary principals group and gave them an opportunity to hear the services that were available, understand how they could connect with them, et cetera, et cetera. So that was, you brought up a very good question. Just wanted to give you a little bit of the context that really started this year, because we did feel like we were sensing that urgency, just as you described, but we weren't, based on what we were learning, just probably wasn't the right time right now.
I should add, what the pandemic has brought is a higher level of collaboration with the districts between the town social work services and the Youth Service Bureau, both of which are available to families in town. Youth Service Bureau is only for services to kids under 18, social services for any family regardless of age. And so, you know, ourselves and each of those two as a trio really have done a lot of shared resources, and when appropriate, shared collaboration on family cases. And it's been a huge help because like I said, within the school-based realm, there's certain things that transcend, right? Whether it be housing matters or other, home-based needs that families developed a relationship with us. I'm just using me as an example. But trust is a huge part of accessing any of these services. So that is a big piece why the school has to play a hub, because thankfully most families are very trusting of the adults who work with their kids if they, if they have a connection with them. And so we can often, us having a good relationship with those groups, we can help serve as like an avenue for them to utilize them. But it's very hard for families just to walk in the door and be like, hey, social services, hey, service bureau, here I am, I need some help. But the school can kind of help liaise in a lot of situations, and the same thing with kids in crisis.
I know for us, like just elementary school wise, this is one of the reasons I love Lunch Munch. The school psychologists get to know the kids before there are any issues, and really, this is what makes Richfield so great. We have that community. Just logistically, how do parents at middle school or kids at middle school or high school, how are they made aware of the fact that they have access to Teen Talk and Kids in Crisis?
It's all through the school counselor. So every child has a school counselor, and the school counselor helps to really make the referrals and make those connections. That's one main way. Or a school administrator might, or another teacher. But the school counselor plays a pivotal role in kind of assessing a student need and deciding when this is something that the parent may benefit from. Doesn't have to be the only way, but it is the most efficient way, typically. And so they work very closely together. Teen Talk counselors and school counselors work very closely together.
Can I add to that? Because I was part of the Kids in Crisis, and I am part of it. At Scotts Ridge, when they came, it was also the PTAs also collaborate and try to get the word out. So there is a big collaboration piece going on, because just like your point, it's very essential to parents. We have all these resources.
Right. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm going to remove this and talk. We have all these resources, and how do parents know about it? So that was one of the other ways, because if they don't hear this way, they can hear the other way. And I just wanted to talk to Liz and Dr. Silva's point. I am part of a lot of groups in which the collaboration happens. I know Tony Phillips does so much, and I know the food pantry, and I think it is so important that we build on these relationships. And I do have to give you guys credit, because I've been part of that group too, and I've seen the growth happening, and it helps all our kids. And I think that's the important line. And just to build on something that Liz said, I have a high schooler. There was this, I think it's great because of the smaller class sizes, we can address kids at the elementary, and I think the middle school team model really helps teachers identify. I think not the issue, but I do think we need to keep an eye on the kids who are in the middle, the 9th graders, the 10th graders, and 11th graders, because they missed a huge part in how to process problems, because as you keep identity, social friendships, they have all this pressure. They're in a high-performing school district. Kids just put pressure on themselves, whether it's parents or not, does not matter. Yes, parents are part of this conversation. So I think to your point, we really need to focus on these kids, because there are kids who can get consistent A's and miss that, and suddenly something big happens. And if we lose or something happens to even one child, I think that's where a missed opportunity is. So I want to bring home that point that we have to do our best to whatever data points. You're the experts, I'm not. I trust you on that, but we have to focus on that group that seemingly is in the middle and probably does not have high risk factors identified.
Yes, I think that's an excellent point. I mean, part of what our goal is that every child, and this is much easier to do at the elementary, harder at the middle, and very hard at the high school, but that every child has adults who are watching them, not just their teachers. So that's a big reason why we still have the advisory program at the high school, is that there is just another adult in another forum. You have your school counselor, you have your teachers, you have the administrator who's assigned to your grade, you have the advisory period, because you need smaller settings in which multiple people have eyes on kids. Our coaches and extracurricular and club advisors play a massive role with this. I mean, I can't even tell you how much. School nurses, huge, because they see the kids coming in and out. And anybody, watching on the stream and in the audience, please, if your child seems different and you're not sure whether or not to say something, just report it to the school. Whoever you feel most comfortable saying that to, it doesn't really matter who you pick. Because
And you can say just that.
yeah.
My child seems different.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Because sometimes there is things that only, I mean, as a parent, you're the only one who may pick up on that component of it, because kids are great at going through school and doing their thing. Now that a lot of them have their masks off, you know, it is admittedly a lot easier to tell, you know, if they're engaged or not. And that's the first thing, is their level of engagement in class. It was hard to tell for a while if they were with us or not with us at certain points. So please, if something just seems different, you know, you don't have to know what the it is, but if they seem different or changed in their demeanor, that's it. That's a good time to reach out to the school.
Other questions or comments?
Thank you very much.
Yeah,
thank you. Let's go to the next piece.
Oh.
And next we have the summer bridge.
That magic mouse.
That magic mouse. So
that
works so well. Miss Gillette works out for Magic Mouse. We're excited to be able to come back and share about Summer Bridge. So you may remember last year, the reason we had Bridge was because we had identified a need to support students, and luckily we had funding that could help us support those students, in particular during the summer months. And really, our goals were not so much academic, if you remember. It was just getting kids an opportunity to be with other kids outside playing, where they were able to just socialize. And maybe there were some academics built in there, but we weren't focused on that. That really wasn't what we wanted. We wanted kids to be provided with an opportunity to connect with friends and just enjoy being with one another again. And really, Corey and team who are here tonight, and I know it was Corey and team last year, and Dr. Hanway helped us a little. All right, it was mostly Corey. It wasn't really Dr. Hanway at all. In fact, I don't think you helped.
She did.
I had a few of them. But the reality is, this team, including Dr. Hanway, they built a school, and I mean, it probably was like a month and a half. I don't even know when I asked for it. But I just know they worked really hard. And having seen
Corey had been here for 3 weeks.
Yeah, and having seen summer school programming be designed, it's really more than a year. That's how long it takes. And the fact that this team was able to do it and do it so well, so quickly, it just really is a testament to the caliber of all the people around this table, including facilities and HR and Dawn, who's not here, trying to figure out the business end of it. But they did such a great job, and luckily we still have some funding that's going to support another summer. And while I hope to have funding into another summer, I've already asked Ms. Gillette to start thinking about what happens when the funding ends. What are we going to do? How can we be creative? How can we take this great idea and continuing to move it forward? So I'll really let the team speak to Summer Bridge this coming up this end of July, really, because if you could believe it, we snuck some end of June, excuse me, we snuck some days into the end of June because we're greedy like that, and into July. So I'm really proud of what they already have planned.
Great. So I just want to have my team introduce themselves since they're here to help.
Good evening, everyone. So nice to see all of you in person. Linda Johnson, Director of Elementary Education.
Hi, everybody. I'm Annie Tucci, 612 Community Supervisor.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jeff Burbishley, 612 Math Science Supervisor.
So the great news about Bridge Extension is that we have even more, we feel like, this summer to offer to our students. And I also have this whole team here fully in place to support me along the way. So I'm going to give you an overview, and then I'm going to let them jump in with a couple extra items to add a little more color to our conversation, and then we'd be happy to take any questions. So like Dr. De Silva was saying, this is an extension because unlike last year when we really needed a bridge into these opportunities that we missed, this year it still wasn't normal. So we do need more of everything that really connects so much to what Liz was just talking about, what everybody here was talking about, is those opportunities to connect, to be with your peers and your teachers in a way that isn't stressful. Tina, like you mentioned, it isn't about competition, it's about creating something, being project-based, thinking differently, doing school a little bit differently. So that is our bridge extension this summer. We have a lot of the similar programming, and we have a couple new programs. So I'm just going to go through the levels and talk about each of the options that we have. So our elementary program was really, really successful. And when we surveyed our parents and our students, we surveyed them and wrote down what they said, even the little ones. What we realized was what they loved the most were the projects, like the cardboard carnival. I mean, these teachers came up with the most amazing projects. They created a cardboard carnival, I think it was in 5th grade. They created it across the 2 weeks, so that was a lot of STEM opportunities and a lot of science to make all these different games work. And then they invited all the other kids from the different levels to come play in the carnival at the end. So the success of something like that really inspired us as an elementary team to think about how we can make these experiences, which are now 1 week instead of 2 weeks, how we can continue that thematic, fun, out-of-the-box way, but how we can make sure that they all have that project-based learning and have some STEM and really STEAM, because we want to make sure that we're integrating, of course, the arts into this experience. So as Linda is leading the elementary team with Kristen Kleiss and Jen Hildebrand, as they're creating this programming with teachers, not only are we thinking about planning these week-long experiences for this year, but we're thinking that this might be a model that parents might be interested in the future. So if we are no longer grant funded, we think that our parents in Ridgefield might find this an opportunity for their kids, that they might want to send them for a week this summer. So that's our elementary program. We have 3 weeks this year, so 3 one-week sessions. Registration for Allbridge did open today at 12 o'clock. Already we have over 269 elementary families who have signed up, and that was an hour and a half ago, I think, so we'll see. Our elementary parents were quick.
They always are, so fast.
They know.
And Gillette, I can add in that I checked just before I came up to sit here, we're now up to 278.
There we go.
So folks are on there this evening as well.
They know. And we are doing first come, first serve, but we will continue to run a wait list. And believe it or not, last year we took all of our students off the wait list. So we just asked parents if they're not going to be able to come to let us know in advance, because there is somebody else who wants your spot. Registration will close next Friday before break, just so that we can let our teachers know if we need them for the summer. So we want to make sure we're fair around staffing. Now, another opportunity that Liz could speak more about if you have questions is the Best Buddy program that Dr. Shoa ran last year and was really, really, really successful. This is an opportunity for students to pair up with peers who receive special services. So it goes across the grade levels. It's 2 weeks, and
we're actually running it longer this summer.
Oh, it's longer than 2 weeks. Look at that. Yes. Now that I see that. Yes.
Yeah.
Which is even better.
Yeah.
So students are matched based on the needs of the individuals in the program, and that application is also open now.
What age level?
Elementary and middle.
Elementary and middle.
For the peer?
Mm-hmm. Our high schoolers in ESY do a lot of community-based trips already.
The reason I ask is, Amy, if you remember at our PTA meeting on Friday, that was one of the questions I forgot to mention.
Yes,
to you.
elementary and middle.
So some new programming that really came out of conversations with our middle school leadership and Jeff and Annie is a program called Jumpstart. So it's for our rising 6th graders, really taking what we know about kids' trepidation to enter a new level, and also our experience with other similar programs that set kids up for being comfortable as they make that transition. So Jeff and Annie came up with the name Jumpstart. So we're jumpstarting kids into middle school. These Jumpstart programs will take place at their home school, and as long as there's no more weather calls, we're going to run the 29th and 30th of June. So at the very end of June, students will get to, rising 6th graders will get to spend 2 days at their new middle school,
and engage in all kinds of super fun games, arts, scavenger hunts, locker combination races. 'Cause I just know that is one of the things the kids worry about. My daughter was very worried about
that was 2 weeks right there.
Lockers. So this is something that we're really, really excited about offering. And this is now also a parallel to our high school readiness course, which is a similar program that runs at the high school level for our rising 8th graders. So what we learned last year from our middle schoolers who were not shy in their feedback was that there were things about Bridge that they loved and things that they did not like. One of the things that the 8th graders did not like was going back to the middle school. So we have moved the 8th graders into our high school programming. Similarly, we took our 5th graders who did not want to go back to the elementary schools and we moved them into the middle school programming. So that's one piece of feedback that we were clearly given and we took. The second thing is what they loved, they really loved, and what they didn't like, they really hated. So they want all of those, you know, creative projects, the bird houses, the cooking, that's what they wanted their whole day to be. So that is what we've offered. So we took the intensive model that we had at the high school level, and then we've created it at the middle school level. So Rockets, Craft Corner, Board Game Maker. These are 3-day programs that kids can sign up for, and they know what they're going to get, and that's all you're going to get for those 3 days, and hopefully that's in your area of interest. So our middle schoolers have the opportunity, our rising 6th graders have the opportunity of Jumpstart, and then they also have the intensives in middle school.
Do they pick those programs when they register?
Yep, you register just for the program.
Like the gardening program.
Right, so if you want to go to gardening, you register for gardening.
We're not sticking grammar in between there.
It's true. Yeah, it is what it is.
In the dirt. In the dirt.
So our high school programming is very similar to last year. We have some changes, but predictably, Ambitious Kitchen is already full.
Always.
You know, our high schoolers are a little slower to sign up, and we do a lot of persuading with our high schoolers, but we already have 31 tonight, so that's not so bad for the first day. I think last year we got up to 125. So again, these are just, I mean, I want to do some of these.
I know.
Is she still here? We got her chorus up there.
I know. I'm going to church time. I'll be there.
The teachers really
I love it. Amazing. So for high schoolers, we have the intensives. Then the other thing that actually, I think a parent alerted us, asked us a question last year, and I wish it was my idea, but it was a parent. He said, are you taking high school volunteers? And I said, of course we are. we need them. So we had high school volunteers at the middle school and the elementary level, and Ms. Johnson can tell you, she was in the building. We could not have lived without them. We needed the one-on-one escorts for the pre-K kids from the drop-off to their classrooms because they don't know these schools. So you forget that this is not their home school. So high schoolers have the opportunity to volunteer at any of the levels, and that is super, super helpful. Here are just some amazingly cute pictures from last year. High schoolers, again, can go to the readiness course, which is similar to Jumpstart. And then a program that we've had for many years here in Ridgefield, and we will continue, but at our cost under this whole umbrella of Bridge, is course recovery. So students will be notified by their counselors. I'm sure they're already in some conversations if they're at risk, but if they are not able by the end of the year to complete all the coursework, we do offer course recovery. And again, that's not something you apply for, but something that you are contacted. You're contacted by your, like Liz was saying, like your counselor who's paying attention to your academic progress. And I do want to just mention that something that we probably haven't publicized as much, and Jeff and Annie have been a big part of it, is while we've been using the ESSER grants to support our tutoring, at the middle school level we've had the drop-in. At the high school level we're using a more targeted approach for seniors who are at risk of incompletes.
So we have, again, with Jeff and Annie's help, working with the counselors, we've been reaching out to students and offering them specific help outside of school hours in the area where they need to make up time. So we are paying a lot of attention, and I think we're actually, with this and with what we have in place for the seniors, providing that opportunity
And
for our students.
if I could just give kudos to the timing of that, because a lot of those seniors will be more eligible for their internships because they'll get themselves in better standing. And I think that's the timing that you did that was perfect because it's a huge motivator
We
for
worked
them.
with Dr. Beaton on that.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
That we get our kids ready to go.
And I think the last part about course recovery that we weren't as vocal about last year is that it's also an opportunity for students to finish any incompletes that they have. So it's not just recovering all the credit from a course, but it is targeting and inviting again and again students in who have just a little bit more work to do, and then they can get the credit for their course. So we feel like with these structures in place that we are comprehensively offering to students a lot of different ways to connect and get all these different academic, but really more social connections and needs met. So team, is there anything we want to add in before we take questions? Anything we forgot?
I'm happy to give an example of what we're thinking around for STEAM or STEM, working alongside our two directors who have been wonderful, Jennifer Hildebrand, Kristen Kleiss. We put together an outline of the different topics that our elementary age students study during integrated studies. Mainly the science that's aligned to our NGSS, our Next Generation Science Standards. So I could give you an example. So for example, in second grade, our second graders learn about physical properties. And it centers around how people in the world create something, and they choose the materials based upon the physical properties that are going to work well for whatever is being created. So for example, we might ask the question, why are rain boots not made out of paper, right? So, students will learn about absorbency, if something's repellent, so on and so forth. So we put together an outline of those type of topics that students learned about during their typical school year. And then our teachers who are going to teach the bridge program can create STEM or STEAM project-based learning activities centered around the concepts that the students learned during the school year.
And I'll just add on with that, especially at the middle high school levels, these kinds of intensives allow us to go beyond the standard curriculum. And I think that's important that, there could certainly be connections to the curriculum that they learn throughout the year, but it does provide teachers the opportunity to design these experiences for kids where they're still learning, but just in a different lens. So I just wanted to make people understand that.
And to add on, a big piece of it is that cooperative learning piece to go into the social emotional learning, that students can work in partnerships, they can work in teams, whether it's a science-based or a math problem, and then they have that opportunity to collaborate, share ideas, so on and so forth. And then of course we're still going to offer our art classes for K2, and then we'll have physical education for K2 or PK, and then we're also going to look at team building for grades 3 through 5, and then some type of specialty class again, whether it's cooking, another area of interest for the students in grades 3 through 5. It'll be great.
Corey, before you take questions, you just spoke to it very briefly, you kind of just threw it in there, about the tutoring offered for high schoolers. Do you want me to speak briefly about the tutoring? This is again through ESSER funding for elementary and middle school students, and then you could just maybe summarize what's happening at the high school level.
Okay. So Linda can help me with elementary if I missed anything. Or do you want to go?
So the elementary school tutoring program is being run at each elementary school. Our principals have taken on a big heavy lift with that, along with teachers who work on our MTSS process. And we've looked at students across grade levels, kindergarten through 5th grade, who have an area of need in primarily mathematics. That's been our area of focus. We had some general criteria guidelines to look at, and teachers were recruited and put together tutoring programs around major standards of learning to continue the learning that's happening into the classroom in either a before school or an after school setting. So it's really an extension of their, what we call their EI block, either their extension or intervention block. where they receive that differentiated learning during the day, and then it's going to continue again through the tutoring program. We've had, great response by our teachers. They've, again, put together wonderful programming. They know their students really well. We have many classroom teachers who are working with students that they know on their grade level or into another grade level. And again, along with their principals, have put together really rich learning experiences for our students.
Right, so the elementary level is need-based and based on really teachers, if I would pull this small group during math during the day, I now can offer them a little extra help to come the next 3 mornings, every Wednesday for the next 3 weeks. So that's been working really well at the elementary level. And then at the middle school level, we have a more open drop-in program in the evening because we realized that at the middle school we already have.
That was from my request,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Thanks, Wes.
So we already have teachers who support kids before school and after school, really in their own classwork. So the idea that Jeff and Annie and the principals came up with at the middle school level was having that drop-in time when parents may not be available or maybe not be available to answer some of the questions in the different content areas. So kids can elect to jump into certain rooms based on their needs. And I think that has gone really, really well. We tried out March went really, really well. We've moved into April.
So you've probably heard of our March Madness programming. So from there, we were able to identify the most populated hours, so that we were able to extend the program all the way to the end of May. So we have tutoring hours Monday through Thursday, 6:30 to 7:30 p.m. in math, ELA, and general academics. So when your student's having a hard time at the table and they're like, I don't know how to do this, well, they can log in so that there will be somebody there. It's been very effective.
So they're all our middle school teachers, or
Yes.
English teachers, or math teachers.
Yes. So they're students, and ERMs and CERM students go to the same tutoring hour, so our students have access. We have a Google Classroom that we communicate through. There are parent letters almost weekly that we send through eBlast to remind parents to have their students sign up for the Google Classroom because it's the only place they can get the meeting link. They have to go in through their Google Meet or their Google account. So for safety purposes.
Okay, so that was tutoring and bridge extension. Any questions?
Questions?
I think it's a great idea that you extended it to the kids who are gonna be in the school for next year, because that was the feedback I heard, right? The 6th graders wanna be at the middle school,
Yes.
and the high schoolers wanna be at the high school, so I think that's a great idea, and I personally think the idea of introducing for the 6th graders is amazing, because I know that I do say, having gone through the middle school, our middle schools do an amazing job, but just giving them the opportunity takes the edge off for these kids.
Absolutely.
So I applaud that. Thank you.
I'm pretty sure the idea to bring the 8th graders up came from
PTA.
somebody, no, from you, somebody who had an 8th grader. That's my recollection, I'm open to being wrong.
We did look into it last year.
Yeah.
This year we changed it.
Yeah, we discussed it last year. I was skeptical that you could put something together in 45 days. Completely blown away last year. Curriculum's great. I wish I could take the cooking class myself.
There's a few of them.
As we all know, cooking is an art, baking is a science. It's both of them. The one thing that seems to be missing from there, we have a lot of arts, we don't have a lot of music. Is that by design or?
That was just the teachers that put the courses together.
Okay.
It is, that's just how it happened.
I'd love to see some of that evolve into here. I think it fits, and I think
Absolutely.
there would be some interest. It's a matter of, like you said, getting the teachers.
Yeah.
Other than that, this is amazing. I just hope we can keep the funding going forever and ever, because I think it has a place.
We had kids who attended Bridge last year who were also eligible to attend ESY, and they were cutting ESY to stay at Bridge.
Well, and I love the idea of using the high
which nobody stopped them
schoolers
from doing.
as volunteers. You know, they're all looking for
They're like,
summer
we're not
camps to
going
work
yet, we're
at.
staying.
Absolutely,
Yes,
absolutely.
they love it.
The free labor was very, very useful. The other thing that we've done this year is we've made some location changes. We're very excited at the high school that our kids are gonna get to be at the high school the whole time. So readiness is there the whole time, course recovery is there the whole time, all the intensives are there. And then the middle school programming will be at CERMS, so it's a little bit easier for parents. And then the elementary level, we loved BP, but the drop-off pickup, you can only imagine because we didn't have buses. Thank goodness for Liz, because the logistics of getting that together and all the different coordinating, timing and people was a lot. So now we're gonna be at Scotland. It's just a much easier drop off and pick up. And again, we have ESY at Barlow Mountain. So just trying to make it easier for our families. In addition, the Boys and Girls Club can pick up from Scotland and can pick up from CERMS. So students that wanna do half day with us and then go back to their programming at the Boys and Girls Club. Mike already knows, we're all in line, he's got his vans ready to go, and we can coordinate with families in that way.
That's great.
Anything else? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Okay, moving on, we have a lot of second reads or second and a half reads of policies, starting with policy 1110.1. Do I have a motion?
I move that the Board of Education approve policy 1110.1, parent-teacher communication.
Thank you, Rachel. Do I have a second? Tina? Any comments this time around? Being none, all those in favor of approving policy 1110.1, please raise your hands. 8-0, motion carries. Thank you. Moving on to policy 0521, do I have a motion?
I move that the Board of Education approve policy 0521, equal opportunity plan non-discrimination.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Ken? Questions, amendments, comments, concerns? Being none, all those in favor, please raise your hands. 8. Motion carries. Thank you. And moving on, 4118.1, do I have a motion?
I move that the Board of Education approve policy 4118.1, non-discrimination.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Ken? Questions, comments, concerns? Being none, all those in favor, please raise your hands. Unanimous, motion carries. Thank you. And next up, 4118.11.
I move that the Board of Education approve policy 4118.11, sex discrimination in Title IX and harassment in the workplace.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Ken? Questions, comments, concerns? Being none, all those in favor, please raise your hands. Unanimous, 8-0, motion carries. Thank you. And next up, policy 5145.4.
I move that the Board of Education approve policy 5145.4, non-discrimination.
Thank you, Rachel. Do I have a second? Thank you, Ken. Questions, comments, concerns? Being none, all those in favor, please raise your hands. Motion carries unanimous again. Thank you. And now 5145.5.
I move that the Board of Education approve policy 5145.5, sex discrimination in Title IX and harassment.
Thank you, Rachel. Do I have a second? Amy, second. Thank you. Questions, comments, concerns? There being none, all those in favor, please raise your hands. Unanimous again. Thank you. Motion carries. And let's slow down a little bit here and look at 5141.5. Motion.
Sure. I move that the Board of Education approve policy 5141.3, health assessments and oral health assessments.
Thank you, Rachel. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Give me a second. Comments? Sean?
Read the markup language. So the written notice would come from both the superintendent and the director of nursing. That's how it reads. So it's 2 people that would have to send this.
And
Oh, the and, yes.
It's not or, it's
So
and.
it's signed by myself and the director of
Lovely.
nursing.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
In the written consent, so
Right.
not just consent, written.
Correct.
Anything else? I think this version got everyone's concerns. All those in favor, please raise your hands. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much, everyone, for your hard work on that particular policy. Moving on to correspondence to the board, starting with public comment. Do we have any other sign-ups or public commenters to come in?
Would anybody like to make a public comment at this time?
Sure. I would like to speak because I learned last minute that everyone can be reading letters, and I'm sure some of you have already heard this. And one of the reasons I'm so passionate about this is something that we will address again. I'm Carrie Ertl, 48 Soundview Road, and so I was just showing a picture of my daughter who was abused by mentally abusive adults at school, and that's not addressed enough. And which is why I take what's been going on amongst the board to be quite disturbing. And COVID hit with my daughter, and so it kind of fell away. So I will be addressing that separately, but I want to read my letter out loud since you all weren't, and I couldn't hear you at first online, so I don't know what was said at the beginning of the meeting. So I wrote to address the recent incidents of bullying, not by students at RHS, but by adults on the BOE. What is so concerning is the BOE has failed to address these incidents and hold their fellow board members accountable for their actions. As I'm sure most of you know, there have been personal attacks made on 2 board members. These members have had screenshots taken of them during the BOE meetings, and then those screenshots were posted on a Facebook page administered or monitored by a fellow BOE member. This member's spouse has been commenting and sharing vicious and hurtful lies. The comments include accusing a board member of drinking during a meeting, being financially insecure, and not taking their position on the board seriously by watching TV during a meeting. While the board member may not have posted the lies directly, he does have the ability to remove and challenge them, which he has chosen not to do. As the saying goes, that which you don't condemn, you condone. From kindergarten on, our children are taught to stand up to bullying. We should expect the same of our BOE members. As a member of the community with children in the system, I'm very concerned about the ability of the Board of Ed to function when some of our members are under distress. How can you expect these members to work with people who are disparaging them behind their backs? Attacks hidden behind private Facebook pages where they can't even defend themselves. Our BOE cannot be effective unless this behavior is addressed. Members who choose to allow this kind of behavior need to be held accountable for their actions, just as this board expects our students to be held accountable. Think of the recent review of bullying policies. Those same policies need to be applied to anyone who is part of the school system, including teachers, administrators, coaches, and BOE members. If members cannot lead by example, then they have no business serving the board. Our kids and community deserve better. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi everyone, good evening. My name is Christine Moore, and do I need to give my address? I don't remember the. Yes, okay, 63 Scott Ridge Road. First, I just want to thank you all for all that you do, and it's so nice to see you all in person. I want to say that I want to thank Mr. Steckler for your comments at the beginning of the meeting, reminding the Board of Education of their primary purpose, which is serving the children of our community. There's no room for discussion in a Board of Ed meeting regarding social media posts. Policing social media is not the role of the Board of Education. The role of the Board of Education is to advocate for our children, and I appreciate all that you do. Your plate is quite full, as children are really struggling, and we know this. After 2 years of unprecedented times, experiences in school, at home, so I thank you for continuing to focus on our kids and their individual needs. On that note, I want to thank Dr. Hanaway for her comprehensive presentation regarding the social emotional supports for our kids K through 12. I love that you went through all of the supports from kindergarten all the way through 12th grade. Many of our kids are in crisis, and I'm so grateful that RPS is mindful of that and putting the supports in place to address this, so thank you. I also just wanted to say that you know, I sat here and listened, and I could think to myself, you know, we pile these
expectations, and we add to the plate of our teachers. And I love that Mr. McAvoy made that comment. And you know, it's really important to remember that we need to be mindful of their mental health as well, and we need to take care of them, and I appreciate that you're doing that. You know, our teachers are, I mean, before COVID, we're everything. You know, we wear all those different hats, and now we've added this extra layer to their plate, and I appreciate all that they do, and I know you do too. So thank you all.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Can I talk again, or are you allowed only one? What are your rules on that?
Absolutely.
How about I pause to be really quick?
I'm going to allow it tonight, but I do believe it's supposed to be one public comment per person per meeting. But please go ahead.
Well, so one thing I've been we talked about before, or emailed before.
Kelly, would you mind just coming up here so we can get you on camera?
Sorry.
Thank you.
I would love to see the regulations online, you know, along with the policies. I think it would be useful. A lot of districts post both, and I think it would be great to see that. And the second thing was, I also like all the supports and stuff that you put up. Like, you know, the program built and all that stuff. But again, that's like when those things are, when people are in crisis already often, right? Like when you start seeing a change. And I really would encourage you to focus on, you know, getting them the support that they need in the morning with starting later for the adolescent kids. We don't want kids going to school hungry. We don't want them going to school tired. And again, you know, I know you follow experts and research and all that stuff, but they all recommend it. Nobody says, hey, the best time to get your adolescents in school is, you know, on the bus at 6:30 and starting school at 7:25. Or I'd like to see it. You know, prove me wrong. Thank you.
Thank you. Then all for public comment? Correspondence report.
Okay, so our correspondence report, we have received 7 emails since our last Board of Education meeting. 1 email shared feedback for board members, 1 email sharing feedback on policy 5141.3 and the discussion on 329. 1 email inquired about the date of our next board meeting, 1 email sharing feedback on social media and Board of Ed members, and 3 emails shared feedback on bullying concerns. And that's it for this evening. Thank you so much.
And that's the end of the agenda tonight. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I so move.
I think Sean had his hand
Hey, I
up.
said
But Ken, do I have a second?
Ken
I second. 10 seconds. All those in favor, please raise your hands. Motion, meeting adjourned. Thank you.
Watch out.